Battle of Culloden, 1746 AD, the final clash of the Jacobite rebellion. What if one misstep could spell the end of a centuries-old dream? How did a young prince, fueled by ambition and armed with the loyalty of Highland warriors, fall so far from triumph to tragedy? And why did the final Jacobite rebellion crumble under the weight of betrayal, miscalculation, and sheer bad luck? Welcome to the Battle of Culloden, where dreams of a Stewart crown were shattered on the moors of Scotland. Picture this: a triumphant start as Charles Edward Stuart, Bonnie Prince Charlie, rallies an army of Highlanders to his cause, igniting the hopes of a nation. Edinburgh falls, victory seems within reach, and yet, behind the scenes, dissension brews. As the Jacobites march south, their fortunes falter. Allies disappoint, the French promise aid but deliver nothing, and Cumberland's British army looms larger by the day. How did a bold plan for a surprise attack at dawn turn into a disastrous night march? What led the Jacobites to face their fate on the unforgiving field of Culloden? This is a story of courage and calamity, strategy and stubbornness, where every decision shapes the destiny of a rebellion. Stay with us as we uncover the twists and turns of a battle that would forever change Scotland's history and its heart. The early hours of April 16, 1746, dawned cold and misty on the bleak moors of Culloden. Bonnie Prince Charlie, dressed in his finest tartan, stood amidst the faint glow of campfires, gazing at the horizon where the outlines of his dreams and doubts blurred together. His grand vision of restoring the Stuart monarchy seemed tantalizingly close, yet agonizingly distant. Behind him, the Highland clans stirred, their broadswords and shields glinting faintly in the pale light, a patchwork of loyalty, valor, and skepticism. Ahead, the disciplined forces of William Augustus, Duke of Cumberland, nephew to the Stuart line yet sworn enemy, prepared to deliver what they hoped would be the final blow to the Jacobite cause. But how did we arrive at this muddy battlefield, poised for carnage? To understand, we must step back into a tapestry of royal ambition, betrayal, stubbornness, and enough poor judgment to fill a Shakespearean tragedy. The saga of the Stuart dynasty began with a promising high note. When James VI of Scotland ascended to the English throne as James I in 1603, uniting the crowns of Scotland and England, the possibilities seemed endless. Unfortunately, his descendants inherited neither his cautious pragmatism nor his ability to keep a crown securely on their heads. His son, Charles I, spectacularly managed to alienate just about everyone, Protestants, Parliament, even his barber, and ended up losing not only his throne, but also his head. From the bloody chaos of civil war, Oliver Cromwell briefly turned Britain into a military dictatorship, which, while effective, was about as popular as a tax audit. Charles II restored the monarchy with flair, but the scars of rebellion lingered. His brother, James II, fanned the flames again with his conversion to Catholicism, a move as politically wise as bringing a lit match to a gunpowder store. By 1688, the birth of James II's Catholic heir was the final straw for Protestant Britain. The Glorious Revolution, essentially a polite coup, ensued. James fled to France, replaced by his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband, William of Orange. The Stuart claim didn't end there, though. James's son, the Old Pretender, inherited his father's ambitions, but not his knack for bad timing. The first rebellion, in 1715, was a half-hearted affair, ending in anticlimax. The second attempt, in 1719, was an outright comedy of errors. A Spanish fleet meant to support the uprising was scattered by a storm, leaving the Jacobites to face the British army with little more than kilts and good intentions. By 1743, the Old Pretender wisely passed the torch to his son, Charles Edward Stuart, better known as Bonnie Prince Charlie. Armed with youthful exuberance and the kind of optimism only a Stuart could muster, Charles decided to gamble everything on one last uprising. In 1745, Charles landed in Scotland with 2 ships and a handful of companions. One ship, Elizabeth, carried most of the Jacobites' weapons, but was battered in a naval skirmish and limped back to France. The prince landed at Eriskay with little more than his charisma, a few crates of hope, and a lot of bluster. At first, the Highland chiefs were unimpressed. "Where's the French army?" they asked. "Where are the weapons?" Charles, ever the salesman, convinced them that support would come if they acted boldly. Against their better judgment, they rallied to his banner. The Jacobite dream of reclaiming the British throne teetered on the edge of collapse. The much-anticipated French invasion, which was supposed to bolster their cause, was abruptly called off, probably because the French decided, as the saying goes, better to let someone else clean up this mess. Enter the Duke of Cumberland, son of King George II, and a man whose military reputation was as solid as his appetite for crushing rebellion. Fresh from dealing with another campaign, he rushed north like a man on a mission, or a soldier with a grudge. His arrival was hailed with cheers, not least because it meant his troops would now fight under the reassuring banner of royal authority. Nothing says "we mean business" quite like invoking the king's name. The Jacobites faced the cold, hard truth. Without French reinforcements, their uprising was in serious trouble. Their Highland chiefs persuaded the prince to retreat northward, a decision that, in retrospect, resembled rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic. Cumberland pursued at a measured pace, pausing for a month at Aberdeen. Was he strategizing? Maybe. Enjoying a leisurely spell with some fine Scottish whiskey? Almost certainly. Fast forward to April 15, 1746, Cumberland's birthday. To celebrate, he gave his troops a day off, complete with what we can only imagine were hearty toasts and plenty of revelry. Meanwhile, across the moor, the Jacobite leaders concocted a desperate plan. A night march to catch the British army in a drunken stupor. Charles, against the advice of his commanders like Lord George Murray, ordered a night march to surprise Cumberland's camp. So, at 8 p.m., the Jacobite army began their stealthy march. Stealthy might be an overstatement. Navigating through the pitch-black Scottish night proved as effective as blindfolded darts. By dawn, they were still 2 miles short of their target. Exhausted, starving, and realizing they had achieved nothing except wearing out their troops. Meanwhile, the British army under Cumberland was better equipped, well-fed, and methodically closing in. On the morning of April 16th, Cumberland's troops began striking camp near Nairn, where they had celebrated the Duke's 25th birthday the night before, with bread, beer, and extra rations. Refreshed and ready for battle, they marched toward Culloden Moor. The Jacobites, depleted and demoralized, took up positions on a broad ridge of moorland near Culloden. Their battle plan relied on the infamous Highland charge, a terrifying rush of warriors brandishing swords and shields designed to send their enemies into panic. At least, that was the theory. Facing them, Cumberland's red-coated army was a picture of discipline and firepower. His men were well-drilled, his artillery expertly managed, and his flanks guarded by dragoons and the Argyll militia. Unlike the Jacobites' ragtag cannon crew, Cumberland's gunners were seasoned professionals. When the fighting began, their deadly precision would prove decisive. As the Jacobite cannon belched their opening volleys, Cumberland's artillery responded with ruthless efficiency. Grape shot tore through the Highlanders' ranks, and as they prepared to launch their charge, the relentless bombardment sapped their resolve. When the order to attack finally came, the Highlanders surged forward. But it wasn't like Prestonpans or Falkirk, where their ferocity had carried the day. Instead of a panicked enemy, they met disciplined British infantry who held their lines and fired in well-coordinated volleys. Cumberland had trained his men in a new bayonet drill, targeting the exposed right side of the Highlander charging beside them. The result was devastating. What had once been a fearsome tactic turned into a bloody rout. The Jacobites were decimated. Of the roughly 6,000 men who had started the day, fewer than 4,000 made it to the field, and many of those were cut down in the chaos. Behind the Highlanders, the second line of Lowland Scots and French regulars, including the Irish piquets and the Royal Écossais, fought valiantly but were overwhelmed. Many of the French regiments, ironically composed of deserters from the British Army, would face grim justice. The Duke of Cumberland earned his nickname the Butcher in the days following the battle. He ordered no quarter for fleeing Jacobites, and his men scoured the Highlands, burning villages and executing prisoners. Survivors were hunted down, and harsh laws were imposed to dismantle Highland culture, including bans on tartan and bagpipes. Charles, now a fugitive, wandered the Highlands for months, evading capture with the help of loyal supporters like Flora MacDonald, who famously smuggled him to safety disguised as her maid. Charles's decision to fight on Culloden Moor against the advice of his commanders was a fatal blunder. Terrain matters as much as courage in battle. The Jacobite cause suffered from infighting and poor communication, while Cumberland's forces operated with disciplined cohesion. Culloden wasn't just a military defeat, it was a cultural tragedy that devastated the Scottish Highlands for generations. As we reflect on the heartbreak and heroism of Culloden, the lessons of history remind us of the cost of ambition and the power of unity. Follow us, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification button to join us on more journeys through the past. Let's ensure these stories are never forgotten. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we explore Flora MacDonald, the woman who saved a prince. Don't miss it.